So yeah, thanks for joining us. The other guys will be joining us, I think, yeah, at 7. So I think there was a bit of a miscommunication on the email. It was saying the class is starting at 9 p.m., which is 2 hours from now. So, but I was just trying to contact the other guys to tell them that the class is starting now.
Okay, no problem.
Cool, thanks.
Okay.
Sky, where are you based now? Are you based in America? Are you in America?
I'm in New York. Yes, I'm in America.
Oh no, I saw your number. I was like, no, this can be a South African number.
Yeah, but I didn't see your WhatsApp. I don't know.
I think we. Okay, I can give you my number.
Yeah, just send me your number, then I will write, because a lot of people, they don't, our code is +1, so it can be a problem, yeah, to put in, but you can just send me your number.
Okay, no, I'll do that.
Yeah, just send me your number, then I'll send you a WhatsApp from this side. It's early in the morning. I don't know how I thought that it's 7 o'clock. I don't know. I didn't see that your email was saying 9 o'clock.
Yeah, I think there was a miscommunication. Or I think I also said on the on Facebook to say it's going to be at 7 p.m. referring to you. So yeah, the email was the one that was 9 p.m. Yeah.
All right. No, that's fine.
Yeah. So it caused a bit of confusion. Okay, let me just confirm. Hello, Rio. Rio.
Hi, Cliff. I'm having connectivity issues.
Oh, it's sorry. Are you using rain?
Hi, Cliff. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I think the connection is quite bad. So, yeah.
But can you hear me? Hi, Tazi. Hello, Tazawan. Or is it my connection?
I can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear everyone.
Oh, okay. Mr. Mapai.
Hi, bro.
Sorry, my apologies. Thanks, Guy, for your message. I wasn't aware that I was on mute. Welcome, everyone. My apologies with regard to time. So I'm still waiting for Chiro to join because he also thought we are starting at 9 p.m. And then there's another candidate who was supposed to join us. So I can't get hold of her. So I think it was also due to the miscommunication, but we will sort it out with her. So as soon as Chiro joins, then we will be able to start. I can start with the introduction. I'm Clifford Maile, a newly qualified SEA. So on the line we have Mologu Mapaya. He's going to be our guest for tonight. So going forward, he'll also be assisting us with the tutorials. So he's also a qualified CA. And then we also have Kondrima Dige. Kondrima Dige is our administrator, so you'll be receiving emails or communications from him from now going forward. And then we also have Rio. Rio will be writing APC for the first time this year. And then we also have Tatsawana. And then you also have Sky. Sky is connecting from New York. And I think even Moloko is connecting from Europe. I don't know the specific city there. So yeah, today we're going to look at a particular assessment that we did last year with APT. The reason I didn't inform you guys of this assessment that we're going to look at it was so that I save you time of like for your preparations and all that. So, but from now going forward, I'll communicate the assessment that we will look at. So mostly we'll be looking at the APC assessment. I know most of you guys, even myself, I didn't get enough time to look at the APC assessment in 2018, but in 2019 through APT, I think AG arranged a session for us with APT, and then we were able to look at the assessments from APC. So for me, I think that increased my chances of becoming successful on the assessment for 2019. And then another thing, the assessment from APT that I've selected, there is a bit of similarity between the assessment and then the one that we wrote in 2019. And then another thing about this assessment is that for me, last year I had to sit back, spend a lot of time on it, and then it gave me Okay. I was still talking about the assessment I will introduce lately. So it gave me like a lot of an exposure in terms of understanding the scenario, and most importantly, it also gave me an exposure in terms of my understanding of auditing. I think my understanding of auditing all the years, it was a bit limited. And after I've went through this particular assessment over and over again, and I most probably went through it 3 to 4 times. So it gave me a thought process in terms of auditing, especially on the planning. And I've realized that that's what most of us we tend to struggle with. So I think, yeah, on auditing we'll spend time on that. And then another thing, I was able to distinguish between an ITC setup and then an APC setup using this particular assessment. So that's why I find it to be quite useful to go through it tonight. So yeah, so I'll be sharing in terms of our preparations, like when you get the pre-release, and then also I'll be looking at the industry research. And then another thing that made this particular assessment to be interesting for me was that I was also able to understand how to apply the industry research into my response, and then also on the information on the day. Not that at that particular time I understood it when we wrote the assessment. I didn't understand it at the time, but when I went back to go through my script and then also go through the assessment, then I was able to see the link between the industry research and the information on the day and the pre-release, and even into the responses. And then another thing that made me to go back into this particular assessment, it was that after the assessment, one of the candidates said to me, "We spend so much time doing this assessment, doing this industry research, but we never get a time to apply the particular industry research that we have looked at." And for me, that made me like what he said made a lot of sense, because I felt like I didn't apply the industry research. And I think that's like I didn't know how the industry research became important into my response. So that made me go back again and look at the assessment, the pre-release again, and then also my industry research as well. And then from there, I was able to see that link. So, and then I was able to bridge that gap between the industry research and the information on the day, and then also the pre-release, right? So that's why I selected this particular assessment. And I think for today, we're going to spend a lot of time looking at the auditing trigger, because the accounting trigger, it was more about the biological the biological standard, which we don't normally we don't really are familiar with that particular standard. So I didn't know, again, I didn't want us to go back and do research on something that it may not be tested. And then another thing that we're going to share light on, it's also on FRS 16, because I think the first task was about FRS 16. So let me introduce Chiro Fadzolutle. Chiro is also a qualified CA. So he will be responsible for our program for the APC assist program. So in most cases, the classes will be provided by him. So even now, he's going to take over, where he's going to take us through what we need to do during the pre-release, and then what we need to do with the research. And then also he's going to take us through the information on the day, and then how are we supposed to respond. And I think also from his side, due to this miscommunication with regard to the time, he could not have got time to look at a particular scenario or a particular task but I believe he has a lot to share. And then again, another thing that I found interesting on this scenario, it was with regard to the strategy question. But even though under normal circumstances, you don't get a strategy question that is so direct that tells you to look at the SWOT analysis, I still find it to be interesting, because with regard to strategy, they don't have to tell you which particular tool you need to use in order to generate points, right? It can be personal or it can be a SWOT analysis, but with regard to this scenario, they did indicate that you need to use a SWOT analysis. So yeah, I'll hand over to Chiro. Welcome, Chiro. Over to you.
Good evening, guys. I'm not sure because I can see it live now. Your video is on. I'm not sure whether it's a requirement that my video has to be turned on. But if that's not a requirement, I'll leave it closed. I don't mind at all. But good evening, guys. I think Cliff has said quite a number of things. And yeah, from my side, I'm just excited about the journey that we are about to start. I know APC can be quite daunting at times, but yeah, it's a journey that we're gonna share together. And from my end, really, because we are obviously sharing, some of the things that would be useful and all that. Just by introduction, I think Cliff has already introduced me. I'm Vitechero Fajo. So just as a bit of a background, obviously, I studied up until I qualified as a CA. I did my articles at Auditor General. So when coming to APC, guys, what I realized and had to learn and adapt quite quick is that obviously from undergrad, going into your CTA, going into ITC, what they've tested up until ITC level, it's mainly the technical aspect of our profession. So once you've passed your ITC, you would have been tested extensively on the technical aspect of the profession, whether it's taxation, whether it's management accounting, whether it's auditing, or whether it's financial accounting. But mainly, we would have dealt with the technical aspect. So APC then comes in as a last examination, which more than anything else seeks to test us as aspiring CAs on the professionalism aspect of the profession. So by the time as candidates, when we get to APC, the assumption is that we've got an embedded technical knowledge. And by that, we simply mean that we are fairly comfortable in answering technical questions. Then what they want to really test from us, just as a last step before we can qualify, is to see if we are able to communicate effectively and professionally as aspiring CAs. And by that, I mean, when you look at the setup of APC, by now, some of us would have known that how they ask a question is entirely different from how in ITC level or CTA level, they would ask you questions. So we need to then have an ability as candidates, when we read through different scenarios that they give us, just to have that eye of an eagle, that when we read scenarios, then we can be able to say, okay, I have read what they've said here, but then what could be the potential or the possible impact of this from, given my role in the particular scenario, what can be the expectation from my side? And every single thing that then we read, then we've got to just keep on processing it. And so that when they eventually test us on the day of examination and we're given required and all that, then we've prepared extensively for all these different scenarios that or angles that the examiners may take on the day. So for me, I think the biggest thing that I would obviously keep on emphasizing as we hold our classes is to teach you how to identify issues and how to obviously respond to whatever issues that may be contained in the scenario, whether being information on the day or pre-release. But then the genesis of our story obviously would be from the pre-release. I think Clive has touched the base on the fact that I will be taking you guys through what needs to be done at different stages of the assessment, whether during the preparation, when you receive information on the day, when you receive your pre-release, and even your role really as being part of or belonging to a certain group. So guys, as I speak, feel free at any point to raise your hand so that you can ask a question or have an input or really just make a contribution. So just feel free. I'm not gonna reserve a question to the last part. As we are having a conversation or discussions around the different part of the assessment, please raise up your hand where you've got an input. Feel free to make an input as well. Is that a fair suggestion, guys? Will that work? Is that fine with you guys? Can I get just an indication from any one of you guys? Okay, no, I can see a comment. I can see a comment which says fine from my side. Then I'll take that as a representation of the group. Okay, guys. Like I said, at this time of your career, at this time of your academic career, what I'm fairly comfortable is the fact that you have mastered your work. You've mastered your work from CTA level, from ITC level. I think you should take a pride in the fact that so far you've come a long way. And this is just the last hurdle that you need to overcome in order to ultimately qualify. I think you should just give yourself a pat at the back for that. Now, let's just explore what then the type of a mindset that is needed when coming to APC as an examination. Like I said earlier on, with APC, we are more, or the examiners are more testing your ability to understand multiple aspects of being around professional. So you would when you go through the program, you realize that first and foremost, when you are given any scenario, whether in a form of pre-release, as you are reading through this scenario, you would have to then fully understand what is my role in this particular scenario and who are my target audience. Because the issue of target audience is important because it will determine the tone and the language. Tone and the language perhaps are two different things. Because the tone speaks to your ability then to say, okay, how can I best present my response to this particular group of recipients? And the language then will come with obviously the choice of words that you would use. I mean, for instance, if you understand that you are responding to Cheru, who is a qualified CA, the type of a tone that you would use would typically be a corporate tone that is used in the work environment, predominantly. And secondly, you will understand that Chiro, by virtue of him being a CA, he is in a position where he will understand the certain concepts without necessarily having me, simplifying them. If I tell Chiro a biological asset, he will fairly understand what I'm referring to. If I say inventory, if I say financial instrument, if I say all these accounting jargons or auditing jargons or tax terminologies, this person, given his profession and his level of understanding or level of training that he has undergone to be where he is, he should fairly understand these particular terminologies. So that will be then different to if I'm addressing a group of engineers. Because if I'm addressing group of engineers, first and foremost, I would then have to try and put myself in their shoes and say, these guys are engineers. I'm talking about an accounting matter. So they do not even have the solid basics of what accounting is about. So when I communicate to them, I should put things in layman. I want to still convey the very same message that I would convey to Chiro or Clifford or any person who is perhaps a qualified somebody in the accounting profession. I want to convey the same message without any distortion. But then these two groups that I'm conveying the message to would warrant a different way of packaging the message, because this one group, it's a group of accountants by their nature. I don't have to go into details in explaining what the concepts means. But then with this group of engineers, I've got to really simplify the concept for their benefit. So in essence, I'll have to speak a pure professional English. Yes, Clifford?
Sure.
Yes.
Tsepiso just saw our message now, so he'll be joining in like 4 to 5 minutes. Can you please give him a chance to join? My apologies for interjecting.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's fine. No, I'm listening.
No, I was saying in the meantime, you like, I think I can do the introduction again because I didn't introduce the rest of the guys to you. So I think it would be fair to introduce them again.
Okay, that's fine. While we're waiting for Tsepiso.
Okay, cool. So we have Sky, and then we also have Robokile, and then we have Tadzi, and then we'll be joined by Tsepi. So for now, those will be our candidates. And then we also have Kondri, who's our administrator. And then we also have Mologo, who will be assisting us. So Mologo is connecting from Europe. And then also Sky is connecting from New York. So yeah, and then I think with regard to Sky, currently now she is with UCT, and then Rio, she doesn't have like a support. She joined, I mean, she got her result late, so she could not secure like a formal study support. However, she already have the certificate. And then Tadzi is with APT. I think we'll ask Tsepo as soon as he joins to understand, I mean, to know which institution he is with. So yeah, and then another thing, while we're still waiting for Tsepiso, Sky, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
I was on mute. My name is Kangezile. You can pronounce it as Ka. It's fine.
Oh,
but it's okay.
Oh.
I'm not worried.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to ask, but I think maybe let me not disturb the group. I'll ask it on your emails.
No, you can ask now while we're still waiting for Tsepiso.
I was asking, I see you guys are online. I don't know, are we registered or it's fine, we can do it? You guys are CAs, you know this thing better than us. You are just giving us lectures. It's fine, it's allowed. Hey, I was just thinking.
In terms of just offering like a normal support. Yeah. So yeah. For us, for us, we looked at it as a tutorial support, not necessarily as because it's for you to register, it will mean you'll be providing a certificate. So at the end of the day, we will not be providing a certificate. And then again, I think due to timing and everything, so with regard to registering as like a normal company, so we still gonna go and do that. However, due to the limited time that we have right now, because we've got a lot of students that we need to provide tutorials to, especially from BCTA and CTA. So, but I think Kondri will handle that part of registrations and everything. So as soon as everything is registered, we've got the websites and all that, and then we'll share that with you guys. And then again, we also look at the part of registering as a cost factor, right? So we didn't want to concentrate mostly on the cost, however, concentrate mostly on providing or adding value to the students, which at the current moment, they don't have much time left. Like December is around the corner. IT students, November is also around the corner. And then with regard to the other CTA students, they are also writing somewhere in September, October. So we just want to push that. We just want to push that thing where we want to add value to them. However, with regard to the issue of admin, registration, all that, we will do that. But I don't think there's an issue in terms of APC, because we're not offering any particular certificate, but we just are offering an assistance, especially at the pass rate that has been happening in the past 2 years. So we just thought, okay, let's assist these students. Actually, at first, the intention was to do this thing for free, right? And then we started to receive a lot of students. And then for me to assist the students, it meant I had to go out and look for other people that can come in and assist me. And you know, people they also have things to do on their side, so they'll expect some sort of a compensation. So you can see, I think even if you look at our CTA, PCTA costs are very, very, very low, because our main thing for now is to build a brand and also to add value to those that are studying now, to assist them, especially given what we are going through. We're going through a pandemic. Some people, you know, they're not really inspired to study and all that, but if you provide them with this assistance, we think it can go a long way. But I promise, as soon as we are registered, you'll be the first person to know.
Yeah, because my problem was that, you know, Saika has got issues with small things like this. I don't know, but I thought if it's tutorial, it's just assisting me, like when I can ask someone who is qualified, how can I go about this thing? But it's fine, we have clarified it.
Okay, cool. No, I thank you, Ska. And then I think Tsepiso has joined us. My apologies, Tsepiso, with regard to the communication. On my side, it was reflecting 7 p.m., but Rio is the one who notified me to say it says 9 p.m. So I had to contact you guys to say, let's join for 7 p.m. So we just started now, and then I'll be assisted by Chofatso Lutle, who's a qualified CA, and then also Moloko Mapaya, who's also a qualified CA, and then we have a Kondri, who's still busy with his CTA studies. However, Kondri, in this case, he's our administrator. And then, yeah, so Chiro is going to be responsible for the entire program of our APC assist. And then I'll be responsible for CTA and BCTA. Going forward, I think maybe Moloko will be responsible for our ITC. So I'm going to hand over to back to Chiro. So as soon as Chiro has shared his knowledge around APC, and then I'm going to come with a particular scenario on auditing a tracker. We did not tell you guys about the scenario that we will be looking at tonight, but going forward, we will share the particular scenario that we'll be looking at. We're looking at going through the APC material most of the time, but then again, if you are registered with a particular institution, we'll appreciate if you can send us their materials, and then we review your script properly, and then we give you a proper feedback as compared to what we normally receive from those institutions. I'm not just saying the institution are not doing their best, but they do their best. But I think due to time constraint on their side as well, the feedback sometimes is not quite enough, and some of us, we don't get time to look at our script due to, you know, again, time constraint and work pressure and all that. So we will be assisting with that as well. So I'm going to hand over back to Chiro to take us through what he was discussing. Over to you, Chiro. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Tim, for the quite insightful and relevant discussions that you've raised, and then you clarified where clarity was sought. And yeah, I think it was a quite a relevant question that was raised, and I really appreciate it from my end. I think, guys, Leaf obviously has already responded to that. The approach that we want to take is to really walk hand by hand and step by step with you at a very close and individual level, so that you can get the maximum support that is there to be offered, so that you are better prepared and you can be able to be successful in your studies and without much difficulty. I think that is the purpose from our end. And obviously I do appreciate again the fact that we will have obviously different areas that we will find some challenges on, and whatever the areas that each individual student of ours on our support system needs assistance with, then will be gladly available to assist on that. I think before we did the introductions, I was just sharing that or about to share what needs to happen or what needs to be done at different stages of our APC studies. Obviously, at the beginning, before we can even approach this, it's just to understand what the APC is all about. And I think I've just given a brief background in that. And again, I just highlighted the fact that obviously APC needs a different approach and a different mindset to ITC and the CTA, which we have conquered thus far. So with regard to APC, you will need to then have an eye and an ability to really just to preempt and understand what might be required from you way beforehand when you look at the circumstances and the information or scenarios that would be presented before you. So for us, really, it's just to hone that ability from your side, that when you look at the scenario, when you read the scenario, you get to envision the areas or all those underlying information that I hinted and maybe not necessarily being asked straightforward, that when you read this statement, this can be the potential impact. I'll give you an example. If I'm reading a scenario and then in a scenario, maybe my boss or someone that I report to says to me and say, Chiro, listen, I was actually just attending this meeting just last week, maybe from SAICA or from any relevant body. And then in there, they spoke about something like the impact of climate change on businesses. And I found that quite fascinating. However, I don't have much time for us to discuss it in detail. We will chat about it when I see you, or when we get time to sit there, when we get enough time to sit down together. So just from that statement, when you read such from the scenario, the person hasn't as yet, your boss hasn't as yet asked you to prepare anything in relation to climate change. But your boss has indicated that this is what I was attending, and I found this concept of climate change quite fascinating. As an APC candidate, you would, if you come across such information in your pre-release, then you will have to then obviously go and do further work on climate change, because the chances are when you receive additional information, your boss can come back and say, now that I've got enough time and I've done my research, I just want to understand what would be the potential impact of this particular climate change on our business operation. So now, in terms of the preparation, even before you receive pre-release of the scenario and you know, pre-release for whatever industry you'll be writing about, and later on followed by information on the day. As part of your preparation, it's important to understand how APC is graded. Obviously, you would know the language we use in APC. We are not marking like we used to do in ICT and CTA. So we are grading the responses. And by grading the responses really is because we don't, it's not a marking type or a marks allocated type of exam where as a candidate you can get to say, I'll look at the number of marks that are allocated per requirement, and I'll use the marks as a guideline in terms of how far I should go in my response. For instance, if it's 2 marks, I would know I'll have to mention 2 points and all that. That is not really the setup of APC. When the responses are graded, I've got to look at your response at overall and say, if you were to read this response, has this candidate, 1, understood what the issue was? 2, responded to the issue, so addressed the issue. And 3, what is the type of the language that this particular candidate used in responding to the issue? Meaning, did the candidate really understand his or her target audience? In as much as he addressed the issue and he understood what the issue was, what is the type of the language that the candidate has used in responding to this particular issue? Language in APC, I cannot overemphasize it. Language and the tone is important because it gets to clearly show to whoever required a particular information from you as a candidate, whether it's the board, whether it's the CFO, whether it's your boss, whether it's internal audit division, all this array of stakeholders, when they request a certain information from you, there are certain expectations that they've developed upfront. And as an APC candidate, you must really envision and look at things from their side to say, based on what they've asked from me, what are the key issues that have to be included as part of this response? And in most cases, unless it's an ethics question, in most cases, the response would obviously include the technical aspect of things, you know, depending on which standard they've triggered or which discipline or module they've triggered, whether it's taxation issue, it's an auditing question, or it's a purely an accounting question. So those are the technicalities, you still need to be right on them. But then at APC level, we are fairly comfortable to say you've got that embedded knowledge in terms of addressing correctly what the different requirements of the standard and modules are. So how then you respond becomes important, the format in which you respond. For instance, if the required clearly says, write an email to this particular whoever and whoever, and maybe in responding to whatever the issue that particular person has raised, you need to understand that you need to present your information or your response in an email format. And even how you go about just opening an email, you will understand that an email is a very, less formal form of communication compared to if you were required to say, maybe write a memo. When I say write an email would obviously go and start with things like dear sir or madam, maybe I'm responding in relation to the task or the issue that you have requested me to do some further work on, and below my findings or what I came across. So that will be a typical setup or typical format of an email. And in an email, really, by just virtue of it being an email, not being a memorandum, you would then have to have, and that's what we want to help you in terms of developing, you'll have to have a professional judgment about the depth and the coverage of the issues in your email. In our corporate world, we can all agree, we have never seen an email that will span for, and be equivalent to 5 pages. So that cannot be an email setup. However, if you were requested to write an email on an issue that is, quite lengthy, you will write an email and then from there present that information as an attachment. Because you understand, on the body of an email, it cannot contain information equivalent to 5 pages. However, the issue at the hand that I need to address, it's quite a complex issue, and it's maybe multifaceted. It has different, it's multidimensional. So in order for me to address all the dimensions of this particular complex issue, I would have to, present my answer in an email format, and even draw the attention of the recipient to say, maybe go to along the lines of saying, my findings or my discoveries in relation to this matter are included as part of the following attachments, which maybe can be Annexure 1, Annexure 2, and all that. So one of the biggest issue one of the biggest skill that then will need to work on, and so that you can develop, is your ability to make the right judgment calls. Because as an APC candidate, there are a lot of judgments that you will need to make, particularly about the length of your response, what to include in the response, what constitutes a relevant information in relation to the task, and what information would be just a good thing to have, but it's not necessarily addressing the crux of the issue. So first and foremost, when you're preparing for your APC, when you're doing different tasks in preparation of APC, your ability to have at the back of your mind to say, at the end of the day, the answers would be graded in terms of the competency framework, meaning whether I'm limited competent, not competent, maybe borderline competent, or just competent or highly competent. You need to understand the attribute of these different responses so that you can be clear when you are responding that you are seeking or striving to be part of the competent and highly competent. So you need to understand the characteristics of a competent response, a highly competent response, and a not competent response. So some of the boxes that then we need to tick just at overall level, a high level, in order to be competent, the candidate has to be correct from the technical perspective. When you're addressing issues, if the issue at the hand is the question around the VAT returns, let's say what you need to be advising a client on, or maybe the board of directors for simplicity. Let's say the board asked you to really advise about the VAT return situation of the company. Obviously, in the scenario, they will give you all information that you require. But then from that perspective, the crux of it would be my response at the bare minimum. I would have to speak about the VAT returns. Whether then I will have to sit down and say, based on the scenario, did the board give me an indication of whether or not they understand what VAT returns are all about? Because from there, I will get to say, before I can even touch base on the VAT return issues of the company, let me give the board just a brief not detailed, because the board did not really, let's say on the scenario that you're given, they didn't really require you to go about how we register in terms of being a VAT vendor and all that. The board asked you, listen, these are the issues at the company. We've been going back and forth with SARS about these returns. We really do not understand. Can you really give us clarity so that we fully understand maybe the view of SARS in this matter, or the position of the company, or what do we need to do really as a board in responding to SARS regarding to VAT return issues? So as a brief, if you start then, when you think about the composition of your answer, when you make a judgment, you'll have to say, okay, the board really interest is about me addressing core issues. And what are the core issues? The core issues are the position of the company around the VAT returns. So I cannot then go a further step backwards and start, explaining and dwelling more on maybe the VAT registration requirements and all that, because that's not the question at hand. In as much as that particular question has not been raised like any other questions, maybe a brief definition or a brief background about the VAT returns. I can't go and say, in order to be a VAT vendor, a company has to, have a annual return of this much on a voluntary basis, and whether on invoice basis or cash basis. That's not what the board asked you. You're wasting the time, your time, and even you're not addressing the issue that the board asked you. We are not at the registration stage. So understand that just before you can even compile your answer. But then now you appreciate the fact that, okay, maybe let me just give a background of what VAT returns are, because the issue pertains to VAT returns. Then I'll nicely explain in my introductory paragraphs, after I've done my introductions, maybe along the lines of saying, and how you even start your conversations or your responses when you are responding to the board, it has to be quite interesting, and it has to be captive in nature. Maybe you will start your response after the greetings and all that. You will start along the lines of saying, maybe it's a privilege to be entrusted with such a big responsibility, or maybe interesting responsibility of sharing your insights about the VAT return situations of the company, or VAT returns of the company. So by you having said to the board that it's quite a privilege to be entrusted with such a responsibility, it shows both that you realize how important this issue is. And as well, you also give the board a sense that you are taking this responsibility, or you have taken this task with the seriousness or the level of seriousness that it deserves. You can even, after you've had such opening remarks, you can go further and say, after you've done your work around the board, around the VAT returns and the issues of the company, you've sought a second opinion from an expert in the field on the VAT return issues. That gives credibility to your work. If I'm sitting on the board, here is a young man or a young lady that we asked to share with us on what we should do in relation to the VAT returns of the company. And this young man, first and foremost, acknowledge or appreciate the privilege that we've entrusted him or her in doing this particular work. Also, after he or she has done the work, she has sought a second opinion from an expert. So the view or the advice that this particular young man or candidate is giving us, it's a credible advice, because not only did he or she look at it, but he also had an expert opinion on this matter. So it has some sort of credibility. Then from there, obviously, you will start getting deeper into the issues. You've spoke about the privilege. You spoke about the fact that you also sought a second opinion. And then now you start to say, these are what VAT returns really maybe arise and what are the purposes of those VAT returns. Then from there, you start to deal with the core issues, what the board has asked you to do, which is really looking at the VAT returns position of the company. Now you start to apply it directly. The other issue that we are battling with as APC candidates, it's our ability to apply whatever knowledge we know to the question, to the scenario. So in the past and in ITC and CTA, how majority of us have been taught is to say, we will typically code what the requirements are, whether of the standard or legislation, and from there try to apply it. At APC level, the approach can be quite different. You know the issues at hand. I've got to advise the board on what to do about the VAT returns of the company. So now, when you address the core issues, obviously you will then delve deeper into what are the expenses that you've got as a company and what are the incomes that you've got, and from there how you've already spoke about how VAT arise, and from there then you'll get to speak about whether or not we were paying or filing or submitting our VAT returns on time, because maybe failure to submit them on time would also result in penalties being levied on our account. If we have collected VAT output from our customers as a VAT vendor and failed to give that collected VAT output from customers to SARS on time, it will have financial impact. We may be in a situation where SARS is charging penalties or interest on our account. That is a key information to know, or the board to be aware of, that okay, in as much as we as the board have given us a perspective of what VAT returns are and how they arise, we will also know as a board that VAT returns are important. They should be submitted on time to SARS, because if they are not submitted on time, then they will result in us incurring penalties or interest. But you see, team members, all these things are judgments that you would have to make in your mind before you can even start to say, this is how I will have my introductory remarks. This is how I will go and deal with the core issues, because core issues, and that's why you're gonna spend much of your time on core issues, on addressing the VAT returns of the company, on advising the board what to do about the VAT returns of the company, because that's what the board has asked you. All these other things are in addition to the core issue at hand. Now, after you've dealt with this VAT return issues, and you've also alerted the board that maybe you would also there would be interest and penalties charged on the account if they are not submitted on time. You can also, it's not a bad thing as a candidate to really share with the board if tax, it's normally considered to be a complex area. And when you look internally, let's say in that company, we don't even have a dedicated person who deals with VAT returns. Because you are advising the board, you can also mention the fact that normally tax issues are quite complex matters. So it will be ideal to have someone internally in the company to just deal with tax-related queries. And again, don't be naive and just stop there. Of course, you have to expand and say a cost-benefit analysis would have to be done in order to see whether it will be prudent to have someone employed in the company to do that, or maybe have a consultant. In that way, you are giving a board a sense that you are also thinking from the company's perspective, from their perspective, that it's not just hire someone to do tax returns. You acknowledge the fact that hiring someone comes with a cost. And therefore, you are pointing that out to say, just to do cost-benefit analysis, and whichever option seems to be financially viable, it has to be opted for, so that we avoid the situations where year in, year out, we start to have issues on VAT returns. And now when you're concluding, again, it's important to still conclude in a manner that you expected at your level. You can't just conclude and say, that is all I had to say. No, that's not acceptable. When you conclude, again, appreciate the opportunity that you've been given by the board. Maybe you can conclude along the lines of saying, it has been exciting to really embark on this exercise, and I've learned a lot. By just if it was a 2 weeks exercise, you can just say you've learned a lot from just undertaking that task, and you would be gladly, or you would be available in future to advise the board on any other matter that may be within your skill set. In that way, you are showing the board that, listen, I have also learned from the exercise, and I'm also open to assist even further in future, should you need my input as well. So the task that they've given you, it wasn't a daunting task to such an extent that you didn't do it with energy and quite a high level of enthusiasm. In that way, you're showing them, listen, it was an exciting experience. I learned as well as a person, and I'm also available in future. I'll be quite energetic to really help. And obviously, you'll conclude in a traditional format as well of just saying, don't hesitate to contact me should you need any further clarity, or I'm available to clarify any issue contained in this particular submission should a need arise. So in that way, teams, your communication would have indicators of competence. And that's what we are striving for as APC candidates. I want to know that I've covered the points that I needed to cover, and coverage is just to say I've addressed all the issues or possible issues or questions that the board may have in mind. The depth is to say I've invested ample time on core issues that they needed advice on. And obviously their communication skills. Communication skills is to say, if I were to read the response of this particular candidate who was asked by the board to advise them, has this candidate done justice to the request of the board? Firstly, let me listen to him. The language that this particular candidate used, is it really friendly? Because at the board level, not everyone who sits at the board level by now would be aware it's really an accounting person. I mean, other people who are sitting on the board level are professors, other people are just leaders in their industry, others are maybe environmental specialists. These are people from all walks of life, and you would know it better from auditing perspective, because when you do your board composition from auditing perspective, you always, when you're criticizing it, you always say the board doesn't have the right mixture and balance of knowledge, meaning you appreciate that at the board level there should be diversity in terms of skill set. So when you're advising the board, bear that in mind and understand that there's a diversity at the board level. The language that I need to use, it doesn't have to be a lot of jargons on text. It has to be a language that is understood, and I still need to drive the key message, which is to advise the board about the tax or the VAT returns of the company. So guys, those would be the indicators of competence. Technically, has this candidate, did he or she clearly display without any question that he understands the VAT returns and how they work and what goes into VAT returns? If that's the case, then we are ticking the technical box to say, no, in terms of technicality, this person is really technically right, sound. It's quite the technically sound response. In terms of communication, the person has really, used a language that is friendly. He started his response in a manner that it's really inspiring. And again, you can also share the experiences that are relevant. You can also highlight if there are any developments in the tax fraternity
particularly around the VAT returns, you can share with the board that experience, those developments. If, for instance, maybe SARS now would start moving from accepting the manual VAT submissions or returns or VAT return submissions, they will strictly go online. That is an important issue to highlight to the board. And teams, you will appreciate that the board hasn't said you must tell us, of the ways in which we can submit the returns. They just said advice. But then now you know that, listen, the manual era is behind us. SARS is moving fully automated. Returns have to be submitted fully online. It's important then to bring it to the attention of the board to say, listen, SARS really, maybe from this year of assessment or from next year of assessment, would only allow submission of VAT returns on the system. So therefore, we need to start developing or just synchronizing our systems internally so that they are compatible with the SARS requirements. So that if the board was not aware already and has not yet started the process of investing in systems so that they can allow easy submission of returns of this VAT returns online, they can start to embark on that exercise. They can start to invest resources in making sure that their systems, by the time SARS go live, in terms of strictly accepting online submissions, our systems have been built as the business to cater for that, and we can easily submit these returns. Because should you not highlight that to the board, and later on the board figures out SARS only accept online applications, but we are not ready. We don't even have the technical knowledge and all that. I mean, your advice wouldn't have been an all-rounded advice. So at your level, team members, that is the level of thinking and the level of judgment and really just the level of thought process that you need to invest when you plan your responses to all these different tasks that you would be confronted with. So just the layout, what are the core issues over and above the core issues? What are the developments around this particular subject? If it's a practice or in practice, VAT returns are quite a problematic area, you can mention that. I mean, if maybe when you were reading, let's say your IRPA annual JSE monitoring report, they've pointed out in that report that majority of the companies struggled when coming to the compliance with the VAT returns. When you advise the board didn't ask that, but you know it that even in the practice, this issue is a thorny issue. Point it out to the board to say, even in practice, it's quite a thorny issue, as stated on the report of IRPA JSE monitoring or annual review, so that the board really can have a clear overview of what are the challenges around the VAT submission of VAT returns. So that if I'm a board member, when I leave after reading your response, which is an advice in this regard, I would be quite clear to say, okay, this is what VAT returns looks like, or the animal that is called VAT returns, and this is what other companies are doing, even leading companies, if that's the case, in the in the industry are doing, and then these are the developments around the VAT issues, and these are the decisions that then we need to take as a board, given all this information that we've been provided with. And if there's anything that I still need clarity on, I can always speak to this chap who prepared this response, because he seems to be quite excited about this area of work, this area of his skill set. So therefore, he can be quite a resource to the company. So that is just the approach and the thought process that need to go in. Now, guys, you would then need to know what are the things that you don't have to do. It's important so that you avoid them and you never ever see yourself doing them. At APC level, like I said, the language that you use is important. Language matters. It's a business language. It has to be a business language. You are at the brink of qualifying as a chartered accountant. So mostly in your environment, even now in your environment, you would know what constitutes a business language and what is acceptable. I don't have to read your responses, APC candidates, and it sounds like it was written by a person who's doing matric. It sounds like it was written by a person in as much as, and don't get me wrong, I appreciate the fact that we are accountants, we are not linguistic people, and we are not even marking the language. But the language that you use, I should be clear without any doubt that this was written by a person who has an in-depth knowledge of the business language and the corporate world and how it works. Not to read the stuff that are just so, not captive. As an audience, I don't even have the energy to keep going. It doesn't entice the audience. In as much as you're conveying a key message and you understand who your recipients are, and you have to then use a language that will entice such audience and still within the confinement of the professionalism and corporate language. So the don'ts then, what are the things that we need to not do at APC level? At APC level, we need to move away from the mentality of really trying to get the numbers accurate all the time. We need to move away from the mentality of excessively spending too much time on crunching these numbers and trying to get the correct number. That's not the case at the APC level. Maybe that was a requirement or the expectation at CTA and ITC level. At the APC level, you never ever heard us saying you must strive for the numbers accuracy. We say when you're grading the response in its overall, when we read the response in totality, can we say this is a competent response, not competent, or highly competent? And by that, the requirement, insofar as the technicalities are concerned, we say you need to get them right. It needs to be clearly displayed that you understand this technical concept that we have thrown at you. We are not saying you need to show that you are accurate. That's not the ultimate measure of competency at the APC level. At the APC level is, if I've given this person a standard, which is a biological asset, does this person understand that maybe the bearer plants are PPE, not the biological assets in as much as they are plants? Does this person understand that if I've got chickens and these chickens are producing eggs, I may have to, look at PPE possibilities and also look at intangible, what do you call it, biological asset standard requirement, and ultimately conclude, because depending on the type of a chicken that we've got, whether it lays eggs or maybe we're just keeping it to harvest it, it may be PPE or it may be biological asset. So has the person really understood the technical issue at hand and really displayed that he looked at it from all the possible perspectives that it's expected from him to look at it from? If you have done that at the APC level, we are happy. We will not be happy from technical perspective if really you just flunked. You clearly, your understanding of the technical issue at the hand proved to be poor. We gave you an issue at the hand, which was, classification of biological asset versus PPE. And what you've done, you went on and dwelled about the, possible impairment and what you need to do on this and that, but you haven't really addressed the core issue at the hand. If you've done that, so you took a different tangent. And from that perspective, then we'll say, no, technically, this person really seemed to lack the technical knowledge around this subject matter, because the issue, what he needed to understand and or maybe touch base on in his or her response was PPE versus biological asset. Display all those considerations just to show that you've given it enough thought process in ultimately reaching your conclusion. And of course, guys, your thought process, it has to be quite in sequence. You don't have to be haphazard. When you are writing, think about it this way, even when you are writing emails on day-to-day at your work environment, you want the next person to get the message without any element of distortion. And how you write, you will write logically. So as part of some of the measures of competence, we'll look at the logical flow of your response. So avoid touching and being all over the place. And the best way really to deal with that is to really just have develop a culture of having the subheadings, because the subheadings are guiding your thought process. Think about it this way. When you plan your response, in my issue, which I've given you as an example in this regard earlier on about the VAT returns, in your thought process, as you plan the answer, you would say, in a subheading manner, you would say, I will touch base, I will have an introduction. You just jot it down, introduction. In introduction, you'll just give the board the background of what VAT returns are. I would then have maybe deal with the core issues, or maybe I would give background. The background can include the challenges in the profession and the developments in the profession. That's where we are, insofar as VAT returns are concerned. Then I would give, or I will deal with the VAT returns of the company. And that, I understand, would be really the crux of my response. So that's where I will invest much of my time. And then from there, maybe you would then have separately the issue of, online submission, online VAT submission as a subheading. And in there or underneath that, I will bring to the attention of the board that the SARS is moving towards online. It will then be prudent for us as the company to start preparing for the imminent, arrival of online submission. In that way, having subheadings guides your thought process. And even when you've got those subheadings, look at them and ask yourself a question. In the manner or in the order that I've put these subheadings, does it really flow nicely? Yes, I know introduction has to be the first thing, but after my introduction, do I want to bring into the attention of the board the fact that the SARS will now go online? Or perhaps, that can be something that I will bring to the attention of the board after I've discussed the crux of the issue. So those are the judgment calls that will then help you in terms of making them, so that your answer is nicely guided. There's a logical flow in your answer. You've touched the technical issues. You've used the language that is acceptable. Then when I grade such a response, you've also highlighted the fact that, you show that you're a reader. You spoke about the IRPA report, highlighting, annual review report, highlighting all these issues. It shows that you are quite abreast you keep abreast of the developments as they happen in the accounting fraternity or in our CA profession. From that perspective, when I read such a response, I'm having a pen. I'm starting to dig the right responses. And even when I read your advice, I'm captivated because it shows the level of thoroughness and the thought process that you've given in you compiling this particular response. Of course, as a rule of thumb, and as a basic, the format has to be right. If it's a memo required, use the format of the memo. If it's just a list of questionnaires or questions that they wanted, just be creative as well in terms of how then you're going to structure the list of those questions if they wanted the questions. Maybe, and I remember in one of the assessment, maybe the requirement was around the fact that just compile a list of questions. We're going to have a meeting with, let's say, external auditors or internal audit divisions, just compile a list of questions. So I'm going to this important meeting with Minister of Finance around the the COVID relief package, and I'm just having questions that I want to get clarity on, but just help me in terms of compiling those questions. Be creative. I mean, there's no structure of how a list of questions should look like, but it should still be neat, show that it's at the standard of APC candidate, and again, they just a list of questions, so don't put them in all of them in a question format. I already said give me a list of questions. I know when you give me that list, these are the questions that I need to ask. Then there's no need to go and then put question marks on them to say this and that. And again, it has to be things that are quite interesting. In a case or the example that I've given of a COVID relief package, maybe some of the questions will go along the lines of how is that package funded and what are the implications on service delivery around maybe redirecting or reprioritizing the funds from what they initially intended for, and then going to now have to service the COVID pandemic, and what would be what is the view or the feel of the communities which were typically ordinarily were supposed to be the beneficiaries of the services through these funds that now are being redirected, and what are some of the mechanisms that are put in place in order to ensure that the funds are really used for the purpose that they're intended for. So those would be the line of thinking and the questions that you'll be compiling. But I appreciate, like I said, in that case, there wouldn't be a format for questions. You just have to make sure that the questions are really reasonable. They are quite provoking, if that's the case, meaning they address the key issues that almost every person wants to know, but there's no format for that. If now they said, right, maybe a report, understand that a report in nature, it's something that has to be detailed. You can't write a report of half a page. Unless maybe they said, please just, unless specifically on the scenario, let's say I'm a CFO, I said, please just write me a report and concentrate just on how we should account for cryptocurrency. I just want you to concentrate on that. You see, in as much as I've said that as a CFO, when you speak about accounting for it, as an APC candidate, you must know when you plan your answer to say accounting for it would mean I have to also bring into account the tax implications associated with that. So when I plan my response, then I can get to say one of my subheading, in order for me not to lose my thought process, would be accounting issues. Maybe I'll give background in this report. I'll give a background of what cryptocurrency is and really what is its claim to fame and how it got to be get the attention of the world. But briefly, I'll do that. And secondly, I'll have a subheading that says accounting. In there, I'll speak about the accounting matters. And secondly, I'll have a subheading that goes like taxation, because I appreciate the fact that in CFO's question of saying, I want to understand how we must account for this cryptocurrency, embedded in that statement is the tax implications, because you've also, when you process accounting, you also have to process the tax implications so that we are clear. The second part is now, as you make a judgment, you will say, is it necessary to bring auditing as a subheading? And the answer to that would be definitely no. Why are you bringing, this is a CFO. This person is responsible for the finances of the business. He's not concerned about how it's going to be audited. This person is concerned about the financial health of this organization and how having cryptocurrency as part of his or her portfolio would impact the accounting treatment. So don't come and say, have a heads up heading saying auditing, and you go on speak about auditing and all that. Nonsense. You're wasting your time. Because in as much as in your wildest dreams, what is the significance of enlightening a CFO of the auditing side of a cryptocurrency? The CFO would never audit this thing unless maybe your target audience was the partner. Then the auditing aspect, if the target audience was the partner, then the response will be different. You will still have accounting matters, you will still have taxation matter, you will also have accounting view, because the partner needs to understand how this thing should be accounted for, both from accounting perspective and from tax perspective. And he will also need to know then how to audit it. It's a partner after all. They express their views or their opinion on this entire set of the financial statement. But as a CFO, I don't give a damn about the auditing implication of a cryptocurrency. And if you keep telling me about that, you are not addressing my issues. Spend much of your energies where it matters most, accounting and the tax implications of it. And from there, you can maybe have a sub-heading. It's what we normally call, just to show, just to shine, that you put a sort of a spice. If you're a six-scan person, just to put a six-scan on your response. Yes,
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you have 5 minutes remaining. I've been trying to send you a message, but yeah, you can't see it. So
it's
you
fine.
have.
It's fine. 5 minutes is a lot. It's fine. Thanks for that. I think I just love the discussion, man, and I just love how then we will obviously during the course of our sessions will try and obviously just develop this thought process in our candidates so that they are better. They understand clearly how to answer this question. Before that, I was just saying maybe as a closing remark, perhaps you can get to speak of the trends or whatever the case may be around cryptocurrency and its potential future, whatever the case may be, really. And then from there, you will close properly. But you would have you would have addressed the underpinning issues, the underpinning questions that the CFO has by just saying, prepare a report on how I should account for this particular animal. So that's what you would, that's the level of thinking and the kind of thinking that you need to have as you prepare for all these tasks. Briefly, on the pre-release information, you guys, you would, given the fact that I've got 5 minutes, you guys, you would have groups that you belong to. When you choose a group, please try and have a group that is diverse in terms of their view and their exposure in different industries. By that, I mean, it can work, don't get me wrong. Of course, there are lot of school of thoughts around it. I don't claim to have, monopoly of knowledge around this issue. There are different views. But my view really around it is to say, when you've got people who are from different fields, you get to benefit because the scenario would have different elements. Would have finance there, would have auditing there, would have taxation there. And it may be a bit difficult if all of you are a bunch of investment bankers and maybe your auditing sucks, or all of you are, a bunch of finance people, your accounting sucks, so all of you are just accounting gurus, speak accounting or nothing, nothing else. So when you've got this, group members from different industries and exposure and from different fields in terms of their articleship and all that, and even their occupation, really, it helps a lot. During pre-release, try and make sure that you have identified all the triggers, re-verify them with your group, make sure that you do individual work. We cannot overemphasize it. Wherever you go, you'll hear that. APC is an individual exercise. At the end of the day, Chiyo can speak about thought process all day long, but it's an individual exercise. You've got to sit down and work on these triggers yourself. I appreciate, I'm not naive to say you would understand or you have the expertise to understand all the triggers. No, to the extent that your knowledge is a bit limited in certain triggers and certain concepts, you will have a session with a group where you guys are taking each other through your findings and how you've seen things from different angles. That's what you will do during the pre-release. And also, like I said before, maybe on day 3 or day 4, after we have done substantial work on these triggers, working on them, going to repeatable site, reading repeatable articles, then we'll go and say, how can information on the day change dynamics so that we prepare for such eventualities? And again, guys, it's not guaranteed that what you see as possibly coming as part of the information of the day would indeed be part of information of the day. But take pride on the fact that you've envisioned this, you've imagined it from this angle, and you've prepared. And if they come from that angle, you will clearly just be on a honeymoon in terms of, you've got the information and then all answers at hand. And then the other one, guys, is once you are done and you're closing shops, take pride in what you've done and believe it's sufficient. Believe it's sufficient because you spent 5 days working on triggers, preparing extensively for this, and you've got material in file. Believe that material is sufficient because you haven't seen required. Then don't have any element of doubt. Lastly, as a closing remark, when you get information on the day, first thing, identify what dynamics has it changed from the pre-release, and clearly understand that from pre-release it has changed this and that. Oh, now I've got more clarity on this and that. Then that is fine. And then as a closing remark from my side before I hand over to Cliff, when coming to ethics, guys, ethics question, you need to take a bold ethical stand. When we look at the grading of ethics, there's no such a thing as in between. You can't be half ethical or you're not sure. No, take a bold ethical stand when you answer APC questions. There mustn't be any room of doubt of whether this person would do this. No, take a bold stand in your response consistently and maintain, uphold the ethical line throughout your response relating to ethics, and you'll pass that question easily. But once we start to hear you're in between, you may go, then we start to have doubts around that. And remember, you failed ethical question, you failed APC, and attempt all the questions. I think I'll hand over to you, Cliff, for the benefit of time, but I'm excited about the journey that we're about to start, and I'm excited to having interactive sessions with you guys as we guide your thought process, as we guide you through the APC assessment. So Cliff, it's over to you, I think, from my side. Thanks for the opportunity, man. I'm really excited. I can't wait to engage with each and every one of our candidates.
Live.
Chiro, my apologies. I was switching bits.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, cool. Sure.
No, thanks for your presentation. There were questions asked by Tatawana with regard to applying the research, and then also the issue of timing and planning. So I responded by saying I think I'll try and cover that. So the pre-release or the information, the assessment that I took from APT that I have with me, I also looked into that with regard to research, and then with regard to timing and planning. What I found about timing or planning is that you, in most cases, the task or the tasks that you are comfortable with are those tasks that you are going to finish early, or you are going to finish on time, right? So as soon as you get your information on the day, and then you also get your task that you need to address, you need to start ranking those particular tasks, right, as part of your planning, to say, I feel like task number 2 or task number F, G, H, I'm comfortable with. So I'm going to start with those particular tasks, and I'm going to finish with those that I feel like I'm not comfortable with. And then for those tasks, you know that for this ones, it's guaranteed I'm going to get my C's for them, right? So because I remember it was the same case with myself when I was writing last year, as compared to when I was writing in 2018. I think in 2018 I just started with task 1. I didn't have a reason why I decided to start with that particular task, right? So, but with regard to the last year, I think I started with task number 7, 8, 9, and then followed by task number 6. If yeah, and then I went to task number 1, which was an auditing task. So I found the tasks that were relating to strategy and risk to be easy. So that's the reason why I then decided to start with them, right? And then by the time I was going to my auditing task, I already knew that I think I had like 5 competencies. So I was already comfortable. So, and then once I was done with the auditing task, I think there were 2 or like straight auditing tasks, because I consider the ethics to be sort of an auditing task, and also the business risk, which can be strategy and auditing to also be an auditing task. So once I was done with the first task, task number A, and then I went to task number B, which was an auditing task, I found it to be a bit challenging, that one, but I continued in that manner, and then I went to accounting, because I was a bit worried with regard to my accounting, to say the pay release and the information on the day was not clear about something else. So I was not feeling confident about it. So I did not. That's the reason why I ranked the accounting task and then also the management task or finance task to be my last task that I had to deal with, right? So that's that about planning and time. And once you are comfortable about something, once you are comfortable about a particular task, or once you are confident about the particular task, the chances are you are going to finish on time, right? And then I think another thing, when they said, or when I checked at my time, it was like 30 minutes remaining. I had to write, because another challenge with the last year as APC, it was that instead of having a normal 8 tasks, we had 9 tasks, right? So what that mean again? It means the tasks, if they are more as compared to being 8, in most cases they are not that difficult, right? As compared to having 8 tasks. If you're having 8 tasks, they are difficult in a sense that one task can have more than one task, right? So in that particular requirement, or in that particular information for the day, you will have 2 tasks, and most of us, we tend to miss that. So with regard to this, I think with AP, the APC in 2018, they combined a taxation, I think, with one of the auditing tasks, right? And then in most of us, when we were done with our APC for 2018, we felt like they didn't examine anything with regard to taxation, and that was because we missed that. And that, for me, that was also again because we are having 8 tasks instead of 8 tasks, right? So again, as I was saying, when you have 8 tasks compared to your 9 tasks, the 9 tasks tend to be much easier. And for you to manage your time appropriately, you must be comfortable with those tasks, mostly those that you decide to start with. So if if you are comfortable with a particular task, the chances are you're not going to spend a lot of time on it. The APC task that I started with in 2018, I was not comfortable with it. There were a lot of questions that I was asking myself. I did not understand fully FRS 16, and then I did not even refer to the notes that I came with. And I think I spent more than 1 hour, 30 minutes on that particular a task alone. That is a lot of time to spend on a task, and that was because I was not comfortable with the issue that was triggered. I kept asking myself, I kept doubting myself with regard to that particular task. The following task, I think it was with regard to, I'm still talking about APC in 2018. It was also with regard to finance, the financial analysis, right? Again, there, I felt a bit stuck. I could not identify some of the issues, and then I could not even perform a multidisciplinary. Again, I had to spend a lot of time there because I was not comfortable with my financial analysis, which was combined with an NPV, again, which also took into account a frustrating, right, the fair value. So that made me a bit uncomfortable, and that led to me spending a lot of time on those tasks, trying to write as much information, thinking it's going to cover my lack of knowledge with regard to financial analysis, NPV, and then also with regard to IFRS stating. And at the end of the day, I ended up being on a BC. So spending too much time on a particular task does not necessarily, or writing a lot of information on a particular task does not mean you are doing well, right? And then once you're doing that, you're also taking a time away from those tasks that you may be comfortable with, that you may do well on. And then when you get to those tasks, then you start rushing your responses. So overall, you are going to fail because you spend a lot of time on those tasks that you're not comfortable with, and then you were hoping that if you write a lot of information, then you're gonna get to a C. However, that still led you to a BC or even an LC, right? So, okay, taking into account of research that Tawana spoke about. So what I'm going to do here on this auditing trigger, which was coming from the APT assessment that we wrote last year, I'm going to talk about the importance of the research, and then I'm also going to compare in terms of ITC, what you could have done while you were writing an ITC assessment or an exam as compared to while you are writing your APC assessment, right? So, like I said, I don't know if you got that. I think you are still struggling to connect, Tawana. I mentioned something about someone mentioning to me that we have spent so much time doing the research, but I've never seen myself applying this research. For me, that was what was a turning point, and I was lucky to hear that, because it was still on our first assessment. It was still on this assessment that I want you guys, that I want us guys to go through. So once he mentioned that, it made me question myself, because even myself, I enjoy doing a lot of research, because it meant I have to spend a lot of time on the internet. A lot of time on the internet, social media, Google and all that, or YouTube. It's, for me, it feels good. So when it comes to time, it comes to the time of doing research, it was something that I enjoyed. It was something that I'll take days doing, right? And then, however, once I was done with it, and I think it's something that most of the students, they struggle with, and once I was done with it, and then I'll then pack that information that I've researched, right? So with regard to this particular scenario, it was about a poultry industry, which is a bit different to what we're used to. It's not like your hospital industry. It's not like your maybe your transportation industry, or maybe your energy sector, or your hospital industry, as I've mentioned, or with regard to the industry that we did with APC, which was about tourism, right? So it was a bit different. It was like you'll go and research, and then after that you ask yourself, what am I going to do with this information? We knew from our research that they were talking about the chickens that they need to lay the eggs. There are chickens that lay eggs, and then this is the way that they need to be treated, and then this is how long these chickens are supposed to take for them to lay the eggs. So after a period of time, and then the chickens, they're gonna stop producing eggs. Therefore, that means those chickens becomes a write-off, right? Their value is no longer, their value is gonna start going down. And another thing about this task is that I had to, I think a year before last year, I reviewed one of my friend as business proposal, which was also talking about poultry and all that, right? And then likely for them, they managed to get a funding from government or a supply of chickens from government. However, those chickens were already old, so they were starting to lay, the number of eggs that they were laying were starting to decrease. They were, if maybe initially they were laying 100 eggs, I don't know, per day, and then now they were starting to lay like maybe 5 or 10 per day, right? That is because the chickens have lost value, right? So that gave me again another understanding about the industry that we were doing. But again, I still packed that information. I knew about that information, but I still packed it, and then I started to attack the triggers the way that they are, without taking into account the information that I've researched about, right? So let's say now you are sitting with an ITC question where they're going to give you what? Because you don't have the pre-release with an ITC. So they're going to give you the background about the organization. And that organization, they're also going to tell you about the industry, the competition, and the type of goods that they're manufacturing, right? So that's basically what we do when we're doing an industry research or when we are getting our pre-release. So we go back and research this information all by ourselves, identify the risks that are associated with this particular information. And then once you are done with that, then you need to link that information into your triggers. You need to link your risk, your business risk, into your strategies. You need to link some of this risk to the risk of material misstatement. The fact that these chickens, after a period of time, then they stop producing some of these eggs, right? So it means they are losing value. So then what is the risk associated with that particular case as far as the risk of material misstatement is concerned? There's a risk that the chickens that the company has, right, they may have lost value, and then the financial statement may have been misstated, right? So now I'm taking my research or what I know about the chickens. I think we also know about the Woolworth chickens that they need to run. They are running chickens and all that. They are exposed to the sun, so that's why they are priced with a high price, right? So all these things, they are affecting what? They are affecting my valuation assumptions, right? So I need, once I'm done with all these research, once I know about the Woolworths chickens, once I know about the chickens from Brazil and all that they come with diseases and all that, now I need to apply them what? I need to apply them to my triggers. And then this auditing trigger was talking about the risk assessment, right? So I needed to bring that into into my risk assessment, to say, when I'm doing my risk assessment, how am I going to bring this information? How is this information that I have studied going to affect the risk assessment, or the information that I've researched going to affect the risk assessment? And I think it's the same thing that we do when we go to the client, right? Where we have to first understand the business, make a research about the business, understand the risks that are associated with this particular business, and then also from those risks, take out the risk of material misstatement, because we will be maybe performing auditing, not performing adversary. So the risks that are associated with business risk will be looked by the team that is dealing with adversary, not auditing, right? So, and then again, I need to take all the risks that are I've identified and then apply them to my strategy. because every company, before they can strategize, they need to understand the risks that are associated with that particular company, the costs that are associated with that particular company, the staff of that particular company. So and this type of information, you'll have it on your pre-release. So once you are done, again, once you are done with all the understanding all this information, understanding the business model and everything, the risks that are associated with a particular company, start to take this information and see how it can be linked to all the triggers that you have identified, right? So I'm gonna talk about the trigger itself now. So on the trigger, on the trigger, it says, sorry that there was not enough time to answer all the questions regarding the planning of the audit. I suggest that we meet in the coming week in order to take the discussion further. There is often lack of understanding of important concepts such as risk assessment, materiality, material misstatement, audit approach, and the process that we follow in order to develop our audit strategy and the audit plans. And then also, just to let you know that in the next week, one of my team members will perform some risk assessment procedure in order to obtain an understanding of the controls relating to the completed production process. We will then use that as a basis when we develop our audit plan, right? So already from your pre-release, you can see that the team is struggling with understanding some of the important terminologies of auditing, which is risk assessment, the audit approach, the materiality, and then also the material misstatement. Normally, what we're going to do, we're going to gather all this information, we're going to take all this information and put it on our file, or we're going to get it from the so-called London information, which will come to you well documented. And then in most cases, what we do, we take this information and then we pack it inside our file, right? Without going back to read it and understand it. However, if we could have went back and understood this information, then we are not going to have a problem when it comes to responding to the information on the day, because we are going to know which information is required or on the response. So already you know that this particular person struggles with understanding the risk assessment. So for me, some of the things, the first thing that you'll have to put down is to explain this concept that they have indicated to you during the pre-release that they are struggling with it. And then when you go to the information on the day, they did not say, please explain to me what is a risk assessment. Please explain to me what is an audit plan, right? The information on the day was a bit different. On the information on the day, they have provided with you the controls that he have mentioned that they are struggling with during your pre-release, right? So for you to start explaining your risk processes and the audit plan, it also comes from where? It also comes from your understanding of this concept. Because once you understand something, then it's going to become easier for you to explain it, and it's going to become easier for you to know that at this particular point in time, I need to explain these concepts, right? And then again, I don't think, for me, after I've went to this time, I don't think they should have even told me that they are struggling with explaining the risk assessment or the audit plan. Even if that was not the case, even if they did not mention that, but looking at my information on the day, I could have touched on the audit plan. I could have touched on the audit process. And I think we all know from ITC, or from if most of you are in auditing firms, I know of the one that she did her articles with AG, and then with Rio as well. She also did her articles with SNG, where they did a lot of auditing. And then there are working papers that talks about our risk assessment. And these working papers, like she mentioned, there is some sort of a thought process into them, right? Even when we start with these working papers, we cannot start executing until we have understood our risk assessment, because from that risk assessment, we are going to formulate what? We are going to formulate our audit plan, which will entail what? Which will entail the approach that we are going to take, whether we are going to do a test of control, or whether we are going to do substantive test of detail, or whether we are going to do a combined approach, right? So there is a process that we normally follow. And if this was an ITC assessment, what they were going to do for you, they were just going to tell you, identify and discuss the risk of assessment that are on the scenario. And in that case, you don't need to go back and start explaining those particular risks of or defining the risk of material misstatement, or defining the audit plan. But in this case, it's a different ball game. It wants you to show a step-by-step understanding of what a risk assessment is. And as the person who sent you this email has already showed that they don't understand these things. So therefore, it becomes important for you to understand the process that comes with a risk assessment, and then also that comes with an audit plan, right? And then another thing that you need to understand, you always need to know where in the audit are you, right? If we look at the information on the day, the information on the day was more about the controls, right? So you needed to know where in my risk assessment am I, right? Am I doing the business processes? And we know that when we're doing the business processes, there we're not testing whether the controls are working effectively. We're just assessing them to say that at this particular point in time, these controls that have been designed appropriately, and then if they are working effectively, and then they can detect some of the risks that are associated with this particular account, right? So you know, in terms of your audit process, to say this is the step or the question that they want me to address. Because if you read the information already, it says, he provided me with the following list of additional controls. I need guidance on the impact of the above controls on our audit plan for inventory and value chain. And if any, I'm also supposed to first test the controls, and are all the controls relevant to use, right? So in this case, we're just assessing these controls to see if these controls are they business controls, or are they the risk of material misstatement controls, right? So we're not testing the controls. We're not at a stage where we're testing the controls. So we're making an assessment. So if I may bring in the issue of work environment in our business processes. In our business process, we're going to include the system description of a particular entity, which covers a particular line item, right? And then for that particular business processes, we are only going to include the controls that are covering what? That are having an impact on the financial statement, right? So this question, looking at my working papers, this is what it wanted to cover. It was not covering everything on the audit plan. It was not saying, explain to me whether you are going to follow a test of control, or whether you are going to go a substantive test of detail, or whether you are going to go an approach. It was requiring you to look at what? To look at, okay, so let me, okay, no, thanks. So it required you to look at the controls which are associated with this particular inventory. And then let me take you back to the industry research. So when I was doing the industry research, like I mentioned, they spoke about the Woolworths chickens, which are allowed to run and all that, which improve their quality and stuff like that. What does this? What is this thing? This thing is a control. And what does it affect? It affects the value of the chickens. And if it affects the value of these chickens, therefore it has an impact on the valuation or on the financial statements. If these chickens, this control was not performed on these chickens, therefore their value will be lower than expected, right? So therefore that particular control, which was coming from my industry research, and I don't think on my industry research they were going to mention to me that when chickens run and all that, this affect the financial statement. They're not going to mention that. It was not going to be mentioned anywhere, right? It was just mentioned as a control. Actually, they don't even say it's a control, but myself, I was supposed to identify it as a control, a relevant control, right? And then a control that also affect what? That affect my financial statements. So that's how you bring what? That's how you bring your industry research into what? Into your information for the day. And then when it comes to applying the information or the information that you needed to write down, right? Already on the pre-list, this guy has mentioned to you that he doesn't understand this concept of risk assessment. Therefore, you need to explain to this person what is a risk assessment, what is an audit plan, and then how do we go around this process of developing an audit plan, right? But just try to limit it to what? Limited to controls, and not necessarily the test of controls, but the controls looking at what? Looking at our business processes. So for me, another thing that really helped me with understanding the audit process, I then needed to bring in my 6 years experience in audit. I've been doing an audit for a very long time. At this particular point in time, I should be an expert of some sort, right? So I then realized I was not using my experience appropriately. I then started to think about the audit process that we follow. And then once I understood that, I knew where in audit we are in terms of this particular requirement, in terms of what this person was requiring. Yes, I did not do well on this assessment because of what? Because I did not even apply my industry research. But I went back before even I could get my script back. I went back and tried to go through this particular process again. And then when the APC release came in November, it was also about the risk assessment. And I had to, because I'm no longer with AG, I had to request some of the AG guys to say, can you please just send me a blank working paper that I can go through to make sure that I understand what a risk assessment is all about. I understand what an audit plan is all about. So this is me understanding what? This is me understanding the issue, the trick, also taking into account what? Also taking into account the experience that I have in this field, right? So I started to think about the process that we follow with regard to the risk assessment, and then with regard to the audit plan. I started to visualize the working papers, right? I think unfortunately the guys, they didn't send those working papers, so I had to start visualizing the working papers, and then once I was done with that, and then I went back to this particular task to say, what is the difference between my pre-release with APC and the pre-release on this one? And I noticed that the pre-release on this one, it was also more about the controls, as they have mentioned. And even my information on the day, it was also about the controls. So on my on my pre-release for APC, it was just about the risk assessment, right? And then when I got to writing APC, because I took time visualizing the AGSA working paper, and when I looked at the first task, and it was talking about the risk assessment, and something that I really sort of predicted, as Chigo mentioned, that sometimes you need to, after you are done with your research, you need to start predicting the type of tasks that they can ask. I sort of panicked, right? I sort of panicked and thought, you know what? Because of this thing, it's something that I really thought about and spent too much time on. Let me not start with it. Let me start with the other tasks that I'm comfortable with. And once I'm done with that, I'm going to come to my apologies, guys. I think it was the network, but I've switched to another network. So Yeah, not to take too much of your time. It's already 9 p.m. So I'm just going to try and wrap up on this issue of industry research. And yeah, so again, when you're understanding this a particular triggers, especially for an auditing task, always ask yourself, where in my audit am I, right? Where in the process, in the audit process am I? Where is the trigger taking me as far as auditing is concerned? And then even when you get to the information on the day, try to link these two things, right? To know that right now, they require me to write the audit procedures, right? That is execution. So you know that at this particular point in time, we are about to execute. And I think task number B or task number 2 of APC last year, it was about the audit procedure, something that we really didn't expect, because we were looking at it from a group perspective, from an accounting perspective, right? So you always need to understand where in audit you are, where in the audit process you are. So once you understand that, yes, even if it's about the risk assessment, you also need to question yourself, what is it that I am doing under the risk assessment? Am I dealing with the business processes? Have they given me a particular account to say what will be the approach with this particular account? What will my audit plan with this particular account going to be like? And that thing of saying, tell us or discuss an audit plan for this particular account is something that I've seen mostly with my CTA students, where they are telling them to explain something or an audit plan with regard to a particular account, right? I believe it can also happen under your APC, where they give you an account like this and tell you and ask you to discuss the audit plan with regard to that. So in this case, it was not about like the audit plan in full, where you also have to go and talk about the nature, timing, and extent. It was just with regard to what? It was just with regard to the controls. And one thing that I thought about after I've went back was my business process, to say this is about the business processes, this is about the controls that I'm going to put put in my business control before I can do what? Before I can perform my walkthroughs, right? So it's quite important to always know where you are, so that you can be able to know what you write, and then you can also be able to show your thought process with that particular response. So I think I've tried to cover the industry research, combining it with my trigger, and then also try to take into account the information on the day. And then I think on the information, they also said no need to provide me with a detailed audit procedure at this stage. I'm for now trying to get the high level understanding of the impact of the controls on the audit plans, and how and why the controls listed above are relevant. So again, for me, it just felt like this is a business, a process, a working paper that I need to consider. And sorry, okay, my apologies. There was a noise coming outside. So, so always think about where you are in audit, like what stage of audit is the information on the day talking about, or the pre-release talking about, or the person who's asking the question talking about. And then in that case, you'll always know what to write, and then you will always, for me, finish your task on time, right? So I don't know if your question, Tazawana, has been answered. Tazi?
Hi, Clifford.
Yeah.
Yeah, my question has been answered. I think most of the time it's just also failing to link our pre-release to the information on the day. Like one of the tasks we wrote about 31 August was requested us to do evaluation. But then, because we have this acquired knowledge or embedded knowledge of how to perform evaluation, to say, I need to take into account 5-year period. But in the pre-release, they had already indicated, to say that it would take so long for this industry to recover. So it's kind of like that guidance. But the things that I think I struggle with, maybe linking the pre-release information on the day and the research as well. So I think you covered that and you answered the question.
Okay. Just to add to this issue of timing and where like the pre-release and the information on the day. Another thing that happened with the APC in 2018, it was that on the pre-release, they told us that this company normally leases buildings, right? And then what happens is that in most cases, like in their business practices, they always extend their options or their lease period, right? And then when we got to the information on the day, we were given an example, and from that example, we were given 3 years, right? And I started to question myself to say, do I take these 2 years or not, right? So you see, that helps you with linking the pre-release and the information on the day. Unfortunately, on that day, I decided not to take it, even though it was mentioned in my pre-release that normally, in terms of the business practices, they normally extend the lease period. And you can see even with regard to IFRS 16, they say if they normally extend that, then you need to include that when you are doing your calculations, right? But I remember the examiner did not really punish people for not including the extension period. There were also some like gradings that were given for, I can't say marks. So for even if it was 3 years, for as long as the other information was still quite important or was still quite correct. And then another thing was with regard to the effective or the market rate. The market rate was not provided on the information on the day, right? But when you were doing the industry research, you should have thought about your repo rate and your prime rate, right? You should have thought about those things, right, while you were doing the pre-release. And then on the information of the day, then we needed to take that as our rate, or we could have calculated our rate, right? So in this case, calculation was a bit important on this particular task. So that's how you bring in your pre-release into your information on the day. And I think because okay, there's someone who was out. Let me. Okay, so I was still admitting back into this. So yeah, as I was saying, to say always pay attention to your pre-release. It becomes quite important. Do not park your pre-release while you are responding. Think about what they have said in your pre-release and then combine it with your information on the day. And I had to go back myself back to my APC 2018 to say what were my weak points, and starting with the task that I spent a lot of time on, which was task number A. Even though I failed it, I realized then I did not, even though there was enough information to do some calculation on the information on the day, however, I did not bring in the pre-release information, which was talking about what? Which was talking about the fact that the company under normal, their practices is that they extend their lease periods, right? So that's how I then I was able, to turn things around. And another thing, because I think I've reviewed some of your scripts, some of you guys scripts. So another thing that I've noticed, I'll look at someone a script and I can see that this person is doing quite good. However, the person is all over the place. This person have good points. They look like they know what they're doing. But however, because they are all over the place, then they end up moving from a C going to a BC. And that is because of what? That is because of the thing that I was explaining to say, if you are dealing with an auditing trigger, always think about where you are in audit. with regard to the particular scenario, to say what is it that they want me to address with regard to the scenario. And then in that case, you wouldn't have to write a lot of information. Yes, you write a lot of information, which some of it is relevant and some of it is not relevant. And you end up being taken back to a BC because of what? Because of the irrelevant information that you have included in your response. And remember, the marker, the first thing that the marker will do when they look at your responses is they already see you as a HC, right? So the only thing that is going to take you to your BC or LC or even to C is the information that you have included. But at first, when they look at the responses, they should see a HC. But because of the information because maybe you have included the information that is not relevant, or because of you were not explaining things appropriately, or you were just regurgitating the standard without making it applicable, there's nothing wrong with regurgitating the standard. Like with this risk assessment task that we're looking at, you needed to go back and explain what is a risk assessment to this person. You needed to explain what is an audit plan to this person. That is regurgitating the standard. However, you still needed to do what? You needed to respond to some of the of his or her requirements, which was with regard to what? Which was with regard to controls, right? So again, application it's quite important at this particular point in time. It's the same thing even with ITC. Application is also important. So if you feel like you're still struggling with this, try to look at ITC to say what it could have been with regard to what it could have looked like with regard to ITC, and how does it look like with regard to APC. And once you bridge that gap, once you see the difference between these things and the similarities as well, I'm telling you, you're going to become successful at the end of the day. Another important aspect is that you need to be technically sound. Like what I mentioned, you still need to be technically sound. When they say this thing is not like an ITC question, they don't mean don't be technically sound, right? With an ITC question, like I've mentioned, with the risk assessment, it's just going to tell you to discuss, right, or evaluate the risk of material misstatement. But all this information, all the background information in the research is still the same information. It's just that the way that they are being asked, right? And then with regard to your APC, this person has already explained to you that they don't even understand what is a risk assessment or what is an audit plan. Therefore, you need to start by doing what? You need to start by explaining all those concepts that they've mentioned that they are struggling with. Coming from what? Coming from the pre-release as well. Do not park your pre-release, because on the pre-release, this person has mentioned that they are struggling with an audit plan, they are struggling with a risk assessment as well. So is that fine? Yes.
Yes, it's fine.
Yeah. Rio, are you comfortable? Do you know what you need to do come November APC? I know there's still a lot of tasks that we're going to go through.
Yes, Cliff. The session today was very helpful in refreshing my memory with everything that surrounds preparation for APC, because like you said that I'm not part of any program. So yeah, thank you.
Okay. Tsepiso, are you in an audit firm, or what are you doing now? Where are you working?
Yo, I'm not in an audit firm. That's why sometimes I get lost when it comes to audit. I'm actually I'm a master's.
Is it? Okay. So
Yeah.
no, that's a good point to mention, and then we're going to try and addressing the audit issues for you, so that you become successful. And another thing that I've noticed, I think I've also noticed it while I was doing ITC, is that most of these tasks, guys, they are more or less auditing tasks, right? So you're going to be examined more on the auditing. When I was failing ITC, it was because of what? I never paid attention to my auditing. I always left auditing to the last 5 days, right? And I was cramming some questions there and then, but I never give it enough time, like I was giving the other tasks. And then when the exam time comes, and then I'll be successful on the accounting, even on the MENEC, but I'll still struggle when it comes to auditing. And another thing about auditing is that it also takes into account what? It also takes into account your sort of your strategy. So it takes, when they start talking about the business risk, therefore it takes your strategy. So therefore, for me, it feels like the entire setup, it's more concerned with auditing, because if you look at last year's tasks, the first task, they were like straight auditing tasks, and there were other two risk associated tasks, which were, for me, strategy and auditing, and then there was ethics task. So that's another an auditing task. So you're having 5 auditing tasks basically, and then the remaining 4 is going to be accounting, tax, and management accounting. Maybe you're just going to include 2 tasks for accounting, because yeah, most of us we seem to enjoy the accounting calculations and all that. So understanding auditing, for me, it's going to result in you becoming successful at the end of the day. So always go back, understand the audit process itself, the on planning, and then also go on to actually start with ISQC 1 and 220. Understand that, and once you are done with that, go and understand the risk assessment on planning and everything actually on planning. And then after you're done with that, go and understand execution and understand a conclusion as well, conclusion and reporting. So after you're done with that, then you start with your ethics task, understanding what is it that you need to do on the ethics task. And another thing with regard to the business risk, which I also see it to be sort of a management or a strategy question, is that, so for me it's just strategy and auditing, is that the difference between it in ITC and APC is this. On ITC, all your business risk again will be on the scenario, right? The scenario that you'll be receiving. However, on APC, you are given enough time to go and understand the risks that are associated with this particular company or the industry. And some of these risks are also included on the scenario itself. And if you look at last year, or I mean on the pre-release, so if you looked at last year's task, the pre-release, they also mentioned the business risks that were affecting that particular company. So you didn't have to, even though we did that, we went out and found some other risks for which are affecting that particular industry for ourselves, but then there were also those risks were also mentioned on the pre-release. And when we got to the information on the day, they also mentioned that you can take into account the risks that have been included in the pre-release. Or obviously, he's not going to say on the pre-release, he's going to say on the particular email, right, that I've sent you last week. So again, that is you taking into account the information, that like the pre-release information, into the information on the day and into your response. Okay, guys. It was supposed to take 2 hours, so I think due to the fact that there was some delays, then it took more than that. So I'm going to share with you guys the recording so that you can go back and look at it. And then another thing that we're going to do, we're going to give you the scenarios that we want you guys to look at before the next week's session, because the next week we won't have a session, we'll have the session the other week. And then another thing that makes me want to look at the APC sessions is because of the trend that APC or SICA follows while they're examining, being the ITC and the SICA. There's always a trend that they follow. So I think if we can figure out that trend, and then we can become successful on our APC. However, I will still want to review all your scripts. Therefore, it means I still need to look at your APT or UCT assessment or endonormal assessment, and then also we can just go through them as well. So thank you for your time, guys, and thank you for choosing us. Have a lovely weekend. If there's no any further question.
No, from my side.
Okay.
Thank you.
For you, it's during the day there, Scan.
Pardon? Yeah, it's early.
It's early in the morning.
It's 3 in the afternoon. 22 past.
3 in the afternoon. We are about to go to bed, Sky, this side of the world.
Enjoy that side. We
Yeah.
miss it.
Yeah. No, have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much. Enjoy. I really appreciate. I've learned a lot.
Okay, thanks, guys. Chap, Cliff. Oh.
Chap.
Oh.
Cliff, wait, Cliff.
Okay.
So,
Still here.
can you also, yes.
I'm here. I'm here.
All right. So because now I cannot like what's this? Like proper support. How are we gonna do this? Because in Zikutla, you guys have already reviewed some people's scripts. So what should I do? Because I don't mind maybe preparing and writing an assessment and then sending it to you guys to write it. I guess maybe the ones they wrote or guys they all whichever the case may be. So that's what I wanted to confirm with me. How is it gonna go about? And then with the okay, I guess for this we could always look at it towards the end. But with things like the name of the software that they use, but that whole software that they use and how I'm gonna yes and how I'm gonna be able to kana ba re o etsang a few days before you write, you have to do something to your machine and all those technical eh?
You have to qualify the machine.
Yes, the qualification and because usually they'll be provided by either UJ or Cape Town. So it's just something to think about with me because I don't have access to them. How are we gonna do that, or can I still do it even without support from UJ or UCT?
No, you'll still be able to. You still go to get the license because you come from SAICA. So for your final APC, you become from SAICA. You won't become from this institution, so you'll still get it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah,
And
even now you can.
I think, Cliff.
Yeah.
I think with regard to the assessment, we can actually choose tasks, right? Specifically for her, we're gonna give her tasks that we will have an expectation that she will write them, and then those tasks have to be submitted. So we can let's have a conversation about it. But she will have specific days where she will write, preferably on weekends. She will write like any other candidates, 8 hours. We're gonna hand pick the tasks ourselves, and then give them to her. She will do the whole thing of what you call it, pre-release and all that, and then she will have to write the task so that we assimilate the conditions that will be the setup of final APC. So just to give a feel that you know of the whole environment, I guess we can do that.
Yeah, no, we will do that. So we actually can also we can also request these guys like the information that they're giving us, then we can share it with her to do those assessments as well.
Yeah, because she has to be exam fit. By the time she writes, she should have at least wrote I would say at minimum 2 tasks, and then got the feedback on them, and just also reflected on the feedback that we would have provided her to enable her to correct and really focus on those areas which needs improvement, if any, going to APC.
Okay. No, I agree, Tejo. So what I was thinking, Jorge, maybe we could do it like for now. You'll just select the case study, and then I'll do specific tasks. Select the case study, and then I'll do specific tasks. And then, Cliff, there's an echo.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then going forward, what I'll do is that I'll maybe when UJ writes their exams, I'll when they do the pre-release, I'll do the whole process with them with the research and whatnot, and then maybe write a day after they write so that I get information on the day under exam conditions, and then also submit it to you guys.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm struggling. Yeah. Yeah, no, we'll do that, Ari.
Okay. No, that's it from my side for now. If I have any questions or whatever the case may be, yeah, I'll be in contact.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
Okay. Hey, my fathers, you don't bother.
Eh?
How about someone?
Oh, Anne, Cliff, what's up for?
Sharp of us.
Sure.
I think it's a follow over the page now.
Eh? Woman, okay. I should know on cat or village. Wagape nna ke a tseba gore go botlhoko o stopile go recorda stopa recording ye mrena.
Stop.
Eh?
Okay, sharp.
Sharp.
You're sharp, man. Go drop. Whatever for us. Good job. What does it do? Like I am making it to you. I think it's great. So yeah, you want an approach. Time. Oh, the text. What's the to text? Look at this thing. You're gonna like, yeah, okay. To do the fast or that's all okay. That is what we. Most of our people, it's a man lead. Get up to my yeah. And get to I'm sorry. I was going like what I was doing so far. I don't know about my lead. Oh, don't look at my lead. What do you believe? I want to be. Yeah, the one. And you move to do everything. Ah. Who's the game? This thing in the water. I was having a look. Oh. Yeah, so with regards to text, one thing about text is if you don't know the rules, if you don't know the requirements of that, you don't go to class. That's rule number one, right? Do you have legislation? Yes or no? Okay. Legislation is important, however, legislation is difficult to understand. Yeah, I was going to against because of the English. So, however, you still need to use it. So, while you're using your legislation, there are things that I want you to. So there are things that you need to pay attention to, right? So let's say you read, you read a section, no? Let's say it's section 11A, right? Once you read in that section, it tells you the requirements of that section. Right? And then you understood the requirement to say, once when I'm dealing with an expenditure, this is what needs to happen. Right? However, at the end of this section, there is an exemption. Right? To say, in this case, the section may not be applicable. So I know section 11A goes with 23G, I think. I get, yeah.